Hi, Stephen. Thank you for the introduction, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. In the time I have this morning, what I'd like to do is to share our family's personal perspectives on the journey and what we've learned through it as individuals, as a family, and to talk about three themes of strength, hope, and joy. But before I do that, let me begin by answering two questions that I typically get when I have a chance to go out and speak with audiences, especially audiences for whom working with special people is so near and dear to their heart. One is, how did a movie come to be made about our family? And two is, how are the kids today? So, as the kids were sicker with Pompeii and as we began to develop a medicine, by 2003, January of 2003, Megan, then 6, and Patrick, then 5, began to receive this life-saving therapy. It's a medicine they still take today that's reversed many of the symptoms of their disease. It's fixed their hearts, it's made them stronger, and now given us time to, given us time in the last decade to help move science toward newer and better treatments. But 2003 was a pretty exciting year. And as the kids started to get stronger, a Wall Street Journal reporter named Geeta Anand, who was the biotech reporter for the Journal, began to follow our story. And she was with us when the kids received the first infusion and saw them achieve new milestones throughout 2003. And by August of 2003, she had written a very nice story that had become a very large front page story in the Wall Street Journal. A lot of people read that story in end of August of 2003, one of whom was Harrison Ford. And Harrison Ford called some producers, Michael Schomburg and Stacy Sher, who had made Erin Brockovich, had made the World Trade Center, or were making the World Trade Center movie, and said we should reach out to this family. This might make an interesting real-life drama story. So about a week later, we got lots of phone calls and letters and emails from everybody. When millions of people read your life story in the front of the Wall Street Journal and you haven't been shot at or indicted, it's a lot of people call with congratulations. So one thing that happened, I remember we got a call late one night, a gentleman, and the voice sounded kind of familiar, and he said he'd read the story and he worked in Hollywood and was very interested in talking to us about maybe licensing our life rights into a film. And it was a very profound moment in memory in my life because it was the first and thankfully only time that I ever hung up the phone on someone claiming to be Harrison Ford. Thankfully, he was persistent and not only became an actor in the movie playing a doctor I worked with, but also the executive producer of the film. So that's how a movie came to be made. And how are the kids today? We were originally told they wouldn't live to be but a couple of years old. And for us, it was as much a race against nature or as against time as it was against nature. And again, the medicine saved their life. It made them stronger. It wasn't a cure. It was a treatment. And today they are a freshman and a sophomore at Princeton High School in New Jersey. And Emily had asked me this morning, how are the kids? Where are the kids? I said, well, I hope they're in high school right now. I'll find out when I get home. And through it all, we had a chance to reflect as they were making the movie in 2009. It was released in 2010. To think about what are the lessons learned in life. And Geeta had written a beautiful book from her Wall Street Journal stories and about a year and a half of writing called The Cure. But then we had a chance to write a book called Chasing Miracles, and we realized that it's really hard to bucket your life in categories. But we tried. And we came with all the stories and vignettes and lessons learned. We came to the conclusion that we could put it into three categories: of strength, hope, and joy. And in fact, even the title of Chasing Miracles is a double meaning. It's chasing the miracles, yes, of newer and better treatments and maybe cures one day, but it's also realizing that our Megan and our Patrick are our little miracles. And they are full of life, and for all their disabilities, and they're still in wheelchairs and still ventilator dependent. The disease thankfully never affects the mind, so they're incredibly bright, precocious young kids, just with severe physical handicaps. But they have the same hopes and dreams and ambitions, and as all of you in the audience can relate to so very well, they just want to be treated like regular kids. And that wasn't always the case in terms of people how how people saw them or us as a family. So when we talk about strength, I'll share with you two vignettes. One is about the strength of diversity, and sometimes what we can learn from the littlest people in our lives. So 2003, again, was a great year as the kids began to receive their medicine and got stronger. 2002 was a really tough year. By the middle of 2002, we were told that time was running out. The kids wouldn't live maybe another 6 or 12 months. We were struggling to make a medicine. I had made one, and you saw a little bit of that conflict in the trailer that's portrayed in the movie. By the time I had my little biotech company, sold to a much larger biotech company, and was in charge of the drug development program, we were told that our kids wouldn't qualify for the first study, even though I was running the program. So it was a really tough time in life. But by the summer of 2002, we knew that Megan, then about 5 years old, was ready for a milestone that most 5-year-olds experience by the summer, and that's preparing for kindergarten. And now I'm out there as a dad struggling with a business and drug development, trying to make a medicine, the race against time. And then my wife Eileen realized that, well, whatever time Megan may have, we're going to make sure she enjoys life to the fullest and in the way that every 5-year-old kid should. And so she was going to go to kindergarten. We had just moved to Princeton. She contacted the school, said, hi, we're the Crowleys, we're here, and my daughter Megan needs to register for kindergarten. Said, great, come in, fill out the paperwork. And she said, oh, just want to let you know in advance she has some special physical needs that we'll need to address. They said, no problem. Well, I'm sure whatever it is, won't be a challenge. Eileen described Megan at the time, and she was pretty profoundly ill. But she was looking forward to kindergarten, and as the school learned more about what Megan could and could not do, especially her significant physical limitations, for as great as the public schools are in Princeton, they had never had a kid so profoundly physically affected with a disorder. And they said, well, let's come and visit. So the child study team came, and they were very diligent, very sympathetic. The principal was there. They spoke with Megan, they spoke with us, they talked to her doctors, and they came back and called me. The principal called about a week later and said, we've thought about it, and we really truly believe that in the best interests of Megan, that she should go to a special school with other children with similar physical disabilities. And so we pushed back pretty hard. And he said, after a series of conversations, said, okay, that's fine, we'll give it a try. But I ask one favor, would you come in and talk to all the parents of the incoming kindergartners? We do an orientation a week or so before school starts in September. And just to dispel any myths or rumors or whatever it might be, just come in and talk to us about Megan. So I said, okay, a little awkward, but we'll do it. So we did. I came in, I played a little video, a tape of Megan, and talked for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Asked if there was any questions of the parents. They said no. And that was it. And Megan started kindergarten. And it wasn't always easy. She wanted to be included in gym, and they modified some gym classes for her, and she can zoom around in her wheelchair. She wanted to be in the school play, and they made adaptations and adjustments, and she was included, like every other kid. In most every respects, she was just like any child. There were very little incidents or mishaps. She only ran over one kindergartner with her wheelchair. And Billy was off his crutches within a month, so I figured we're okay. And by January of that year, she had to take a week off because she had to go to the hospital to start receiving that life-saving medicine. So that was a great experience for her, for our family, but it was a great experience for everybody in the community as well. She finished his kindergarten. It was a great year, especially as she got stronger and could do so much more. And we got to probably middle of June or so, and they do, one of these moving on ceremonies with the cap and the gown for the kindergartners. Kind of a neat thing for a parent, any parent, to experience. A little extra special for us that year. The principal came up to me toward the end of the ceremony and said, John, could I have a moment? And I started to think, I'm like, well, God, Billy got run over 4 months ago. He must be okay. And he said, no, I just want to talk to you. He said, I want to tell you something. He said, after your talk back in early September, I got a lot of calls and letters and emails. And the message was all the same. It was beautiful family and wonderful young girl, and we wish her well, but boy, kindergarten's so important, and gosh, that kid may get really sick, or she might not live through the year, or with her special needs, it may take away from my child's learning. So if there's any way you could please just not put my son or daughter in that girl's class. And I'm listening to this, and it was 9 months after the fact, and I thought, well, maybe he's telling me this so it could be a prelude to the next conversation of maybe why public school wasn't the right place for Megan in the first grade. But it wasn't. He said, John, I tell you this for a reason. It's because in the last couple of weeks I've gotten more letters and phone calls and emails, and the message is all the same. But this time the message is, boy, I know you have to be real unbiased when you put kids into first grade classes, and everybody's always jockeying for the right teachers and spots. But if there's any way you could put my son or my daughter with Megan, we'd really appreciate it. So sometimes the greatest lessons we learn aren't from big people standing at podiums with microphones. They're not from lectures. They're not even from movies. They're sometimes just from being a part of life, and sometimes from just watching special little kids who just want to be treated like anybody else. There's another great lesson in strength beyond diversity, and that's the strength of relying on others and knowing that you can't do it by yourself. By the fall of 2004, the kids were so much stronger, and we could finally start to do things that parents typically couldn't do with special needs kids like Megan and Patrick. Now, I grew up on the other side of the George Washington Bridge in New Jersey. My dad was a cop in Englewood, New Jersey. We didn't go to a lot of events. We didn't go to movie premieres and cocktail parties. That was kind of a new world for us. I didn't know any CEOs. But one thing we always did, we went every year. My dad was an Irish cop, so we went to the St. Patrick's Day Parade here in Manhattan. So I knew about that, but we started to think, gee, wouldn't it be great if we could take the kids to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade? I'd never been, the kids had never been, we'd make an event out of it. And so we did, and we planned, and by that point had some measure of financial security. We can get some neat hotel rooms off Central Park and bring the kids in. We have to pre-plan it and have the hospital equipment and the oxygen and nurses with us. But we could do all that. We planned, and we came into the city, and Megan zoomed down Fifth Avenue in her wheelchair and did her shopping. We went to a play. We had dinner. The next morning, in the spirit of being a family and making memories, we had to go out to the parade. Now, it takes a couple of hours to get Megan and Patrick out of their beds and do the physical therapy and the medicines and a regimen that I think many of you are familiar with. So we're running late, and the kids want to get to the parade. We brought a lot of people with us. We brought aunts and uncles and cousins. The kids each got to bring a friend, two of whom to this day I still don't know their name, but they were terrific. We brought our brand new Jack Russell puppy because we thought getting a Jack Russell would be a good idea because the house wasn't lively enough. And we came out of the Plaza Hotel, and I went to Fifth Avenue thinking, well, we'll just get our spot because that's what we always did for St. Patrick's Day. And then it dawned on me, parade's a few avenues over this time. And 3.5 million people were going to watch the parade, many of whom had been there for a day or two to pick their spots. So instead of turning right toward Fifth Avenue, we turned left to head over to Columbus Circle, walking along Central Park South. And I see this sea of humanity in front of me, that tens of thousands of people lined up, and way in the distance you can see the floats. And I started to think, you know what, I'd prepared for everything. Had hired everybody we needed, and paid for whatever we needed to do. And as we're walking down that and I'm coming up toward the crowd, I start to think, I have absolutely no idea how the kids are going to see the parade. So now I look back, and of course there's an art to being a dad and a CEO. It's just look like you're in charge. So I look back at the kids, and Eileen, they get this concerned look on their face. I said, don't worry, I have a plan. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, what in God's name am I going to do? So we get up to about the edge, and the middle of the street was open for emergency personnel for access. So I thought, boy, if I can just get the kids on the other side of those barricades, even though we're 2 or 3 blocks away, they can see the parades and the float. So I had a brilliant idea. I would move one of the blue New York City Police Department barricades. I figured as the son of a cop, why not? Well, drop my glasses. It turns out that the New York's finest really, really don't like when you move their barricades. So this enormous lieutenant walks up, big burly guy, and he just starts berating me, screaming, he's just towering over me. What are you doing? And then he just stops, and he sees the kids, and he says, wait here, I'll be right back. And now the kids, Eileen, everybody's looking at me like, uh-oh, Daddy's going to jail. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, Daddy's going to jail. And he comes back with 2 patrolmen, and I'm like, well, come on, I'm not really a big guy. You don't need to. And they move the barricade. And they let the kids, the family, the friends, the Jack Russell, all the way in. And I thought that was great. And I went to say thank you, and he said, follow me. And for the next 5 or 7 minutes, these 3 cops proceeded to clear 3 city blocks of people, yelling, out of the way, make a hole, coming through, other words. I look back to make sure the kids are following. Megan's in her motorized wheelchair, making sure they're following. I look back. Of course, I give them that look like, I told you. Sorry the cops were late, but I told you. And then we get up to an area by Columbus Circle where people, about maybe, 500 of them, are sitting down watching the parade. And God love them, they've probably been there for 2 days staking out those seats. And the cops say, everybody up. And we get up to the front, literally the front of the parade. And by that point, you get a tear in your eye and you think, my God, this is the greatest thing you could ever hope for. And I look at the cop, again, finally this lieutenant, to say thank you. And he was just looking at the kids, and he realized that how they were seated in their chair, the last set of barricades was just blocking and obstructing their view. So he and the other cops immediately move that, and the kids go onto the street. And now my greatest fear is not that they're going to miss the parade, it's that they're actually going to be run over by a float. But they're settled, and I'm trying to get them back, totally not paying attention to Dad, and that's okay. And I finally got the attention of this big lieutenant, and I said, thank you, you made our Thanksgiving. And he looked at me and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, no, thank you, you made ours. He said, God bless, and kind of walked away. And I thought in that moment, you talk about strength, how important it is to rely on others. Even when you think you've got everything planned for, set, and under control, in those moments, sometimes you need to rely on the kindness of strangers. And that lieutenant and those 2 young patrolmen helped us, not because they were ordered to, or because it was in their job description that day. They did it because they could, because it was right. I think there's also a lesson, too. I think he meant it when he said that we made his Thanksgiving, and that's the circular nature of giving and helping others. And you think about all of you in this field and what you do for so many. And I know for each of you, partly you do it because it enriches your own lives. And that's a great lesson for so many who still need to walk with us on this journey and think about how they can fundamentally change the lives of some of the weakest and most vulnerable in our society. So that's the importance of strength with diversity and relying on others. Hope is really important too for so many of the people that we serve and work with and live with. When I first came into biotechnology, I didn't go out to that tiny little company. It was actually in Oklahoma City that we started, and I commuted to every week for a couple of years. I actually went up to Boston, and I went to the biotechnology industry show. About 10,000 people go to this conference, and this was March of 2000, as the then 32-year-old newly minted CEO of a 3-person company in Oklahoma with $30,000 in the bank, nobody requested to meet with me. So that's okay. I didn't really plan on it. What I wanted to do is just kind of take it in and learn about this new industry that was making medicines for people with so many different ailments and disorders. And I went to the keynote address that night. And it was given by a man who was probably in his late 40s or so then, was in a wheelchair, ventilator dependent, was a quadriplegic. And he came out on the stage and he said, biotechnology. He said, that's a great big word that for people like me just means hope. He said, it's hope that maybe some of you in the audience are working on treatments or maybe even cures for paralysis. It's the hope that maybe one day some of those treatments might come in time, that I could walk on the beach with my wife again or play football with my boys and maybe just get back to what life was before my accident. But he said something that really struck me, and I had known what we had been living with for a couple of years with our kids and other families with neuromuscular disease. But he said that the hope that we were providing was hope not just for him and for others like him. It was for hope for people who at that moment in life and time didn't even know that they needed hope. He said it's for the kid who 6 months from now is going to be hitting a football game and be rendered a quadriplegic, with a young lady in a diving accident, and her life and her family's life and their friends are going to fundamentally change forever. And they're going to go online and they're going to start looking up research and articles. And he looked out in the audience and he said, and they're going to look up papers written by some of you, papers for ideas that you haven't even yet thought of. And that's the importance of hope. It's providing it not just for people who need it today. And you all in this field, and we in biotechnology working with very special people, we kind of know that and we kind of live that. But I think sending that message out to so many different people who we need to rely on, who we work with, that message of hope, that it's not just for the people we serve today, but it's for the next generation. And you talk about being on the cusp of a new era. It's not just to change the lives of people who need these special services, who need to lead the fullest lives possible. It's for people yet to come. And that's a great lesson in hope, that you could provide hope for so many yet to come. I'll leave you with this last thought. And it falls in the category of joy. In fact, if you read Chasing Miracles, it's the largest section is joy, and there's so many stories that are just filled with laughter. We spend a lot more time over the years we've spent laughing as a family than we ever have crying. In starting biotech companies, you got to kind of learn to be an entrepreneur and to innovate and take risks, things that we all do and things everyone in this field needs to do every day. I started this latest biotechnology company about 8 years ago, and it was to develop the next generation treatments for a range of rare diseases. In fact, now we're even working in Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, but also too in Pompe disease. And the company's, like any biotechnology company, it's been a lot of great successes and a lot of setbacks, but the spring of 2007 was a really great time for the company. The science was cooperating, we had new drugs in man, and we saw some great results. Wall Street was on fire, and everybody wanted to take our company public. And as an entrepreneur, one of the heights of success is your IPO. So we had all the big banks here in New York court us and tell us how great we were and the capital they could raise for us, which was tremendous. And so we did it, and we filed all the papers with the Securities and Exchange Commission to become a public corporation. When you become public, you have to sell new stock to investors around the world, and these investment banks treat you really, really well. And they put you on these big private jets, and they fly you around, and it's really nice to have people saying, just please, if it's possible, we'd love to give you money. Situation I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Stephen, I think you live this every day. I'd never lived it before either, and it's actually pretty cool. So we go around, and finally after 8 weeks, or 8 weeks, it seemed like 8 weeks, 2 weeks, we come back to New York, we close the deal. We had been offered 8 times the money we were seeking, and we said no, we'd stick with the money we were seeking, $75 million, put in by investors who valued our little company at that time at $300 million. So as an entrepreneur, and the board and the investors are happy, the employees are ecstatic. Some of them, came into some newfound wealth for added security in their life. The day that we started trading on the stock exchange, I got to open the stock exchange, was on CNBC, and traveled around the city. It's a pretty great experience. I bussed the whole company in. By that night, we had a great big party, and it was a chance to celebrate. I gave a little talk to the company, and I said, it's great, and we've come so far in just 2 years. But now we got to go and do it again. So have a great night, but I'll see you all tomorrow back at work. And I went home. I'd been on the road for 2 weeks. And I came in, and I think like any mom or dad traveling, the first thing you do is check on the kids. It was about 10 o'clock at night or so, and they had school the next morning, and I went in, checked on the boys, and John and Patrick are pretty sound sleepers. Gave them a kiss. They didn't move. And I checked on my little Megan. And she's a really light sleeper, and I gave her a kiss, and she woke up, and she said, "Daddy." I said, "Megan." And she kind of threw her arms open, and she's laying in the bed, still tethered to her ventilator. She said, "I missed you." I said, "I missed you too, sweetie." She said, "How was your big business trip?" I said, "Well, Megan, I think you'd be pretty proud of the old man." She said, "I know, Daddy, I saw you on TV today." I said, "Really? What'd you think? How'd I look?" She said, "Well, Dad, actually, you looked really, really," I don't know, I'm thinking, my suit on, I don't know, powerful. She said, "Actually, Dad, you looked really, really kind of short." Okay. Then there was that kind of awkward silence in the room. She's 10 years old. Megan is also the master at how to damn with faint praise, and I had a yellow power tie on there for the TV shows, and she said, "Oh, but Dad, I love that tie. It was awesome. So much better than anyone else's tie on that TV show." Thanks, Megan. She said to me then, she said, "You're going to be here in the morning?" I said, "Yeah, I'll be here." She said, "Will you take me to school?" I said, "Yeah, sweetie, I'll drive you to school." And she said, "Okay," and she closed her eyes and said, "Good night, I love you." I said, "Good night, I love you." And I walked out, and I think I realized in that moment the humility in every moment in life, even in the humility in those sometimes fleeting times of success. And it wasn't the humility because Megan teased me, the kids tease me all the time. It was the humility in realizing that Megan absolutely, truly did not care about how much money we raised or fancy airplanes or my being on TV. What she cared about was that Daddy was on a long business trip, and he'd been gone a long time. And he was home, and he was going to get to take her to school the next day. And I think there I realized maybe the greatest joy in life really is just about time. And that's why what everybody in this room does for so many people is so important. About providing time, not just time in itself, but quality time. Time to enjoy and to relish. And I'll leave you with these last words that Gita wrote talking about the topic of time in her book, The Cure. After 2 years of interviewing our family and hundreds of people and writing about it in a book, she had a chance in the epilogue just before it was coming out in 2006 to reflect on everything she learned. And so I'll leave you with Gita's words about what she learned from our family and especially from our children, about the joy in life and the importance of time. Gita wrote that as human beings, we are defined at our cores by how we respond to hardship. Writing about the Crowleys has taught me that there isn't one right way, but that each person must find her own path, drawing on her own unique strength, passion, and resources. Who can say whether John's or Eileen's role is more important? Fueled by love, each of their journeys is tough, vital, and courageous. Knowing that each day really may be their children's last, they live with abandon, throwing themselves into every birthday party, trip to Broadway, weekend in Ocean City. Knowing so intimately the tenuousness of life, they instinctively understand what most of us forget, that all they really have and all they really are pursuing is time. Time with the people they love. And so they grab onto each precious moment, cherish it, celebrate it, laugh at it, cry in it, and hope for another, even as they continue on the journey into the unknown and the unknowable that we all call life. Thanks for all you do. God bless.